kind of reminded me at some point of something that Lumpur Viradamo sometimes, you may have heard him talk about this. He spent, was it 1 year, 2 years, 1 year maybe, in engineering school way back when he was a young man, many decades ago. And there's one fellow student of his who is the best, he was recognized as the best student among them. And what Lumpur said, he must have, because I think Ajahn Viradamo has always been a kind of curious kind of fellow, outgoing and engaging in nature. And at some point he must have asked this fellow, what was his trick to do so well in his studies? And his answer was that he always went back to first principles. That is, in this case, I suppose, having never taken engineering, maybe Sanko will have to chime in at some point. You're given equations, you're given algorithms. This is a principle that you then work with to apply for whatever form of engineering you're engaged in. Mathematical principle or whatever. But this fellow always, when he was given some equation of this kind, algorithm or what have you, he would always take it back and as he said, take it from first principles. He wanted to understand how that algorithm, that state of affairs came to be. Why do we rely on this beginning for our work? He wanted to find this out. So that's how he did it. And so he, I guess you could say, this is a bit of a pun, but he sort of back engineered the tradition that he was learning from. And this notion of first principles is an interesting one, I think, and kind of where I'm going with my reflections right now is just my day, you might say, or our day here, has been spent in a way which leads me to think of first principles. And this afternoon, talking about the Buddha, talking about the early Vedic context, the tradition of wandering mendicants, the caste system, and all of that, meditation, formation of Buddhism, Buddhist schools, movement eventually into Thailand, forest monks, city monks, scholar monks, this kind of thing. Buddhism developing in Northeast Thailand, Lumpur Cha being brought up in that rugged, resourceful culture, taking to the Dhamma in the way he did, and applying what was clearly some prodigious skills in his practice, determination among them, certainly. And as he always says, patient endurance. And then Lumpur Samedo, his first Western disciple, who will be here in less than a month now. Yeah, less than a month. My goodness, Lumpur Samedo is coming right here. He goes to Northeast Thailand, struggles with the language, struggles with the insects, struggles with the food, struggles with everything. But he persists because of his patient endurance and some kind of keening wisdom, innate wisdom in him that draws him continually to the practice, to the monastic form, and in particular to studying with this enigmatic, brilliant man, this little Northeast Thai villager who is so wise and so calm and collected, so available. Lumpur Samedo turns out to be something of a natural teacher. He's a leader. People are drawn to him. The Westerners who come to Wat Nam Papong are sort of pointed in his direction so that he can usher them into monastic life. Then he is led to begin the Wat Panana Chat, the International Forest Monastery, within walking distance, a good long walk, but still walking distance up in the Ubon area. So that gets started. Monks that we've heard about, some of the monks who have visited us also at Tisarna, begin their monastic practice there. Lumpur Viradamo meets Lumpur Samedo around this time, I think at Wat Pong, but then goes among the very first to Wat Pananachat. Eventually there's an invitation to go to England. So Lumpur Samedo goes to England with Lumpur Cha to sort of scout things out, gauge a sense of the temperament of the English people, the readiness that they may or may not have to absorbing monastic life, monastic practice, to absorbing Buddhist monastic life and practice in this strange land. It's found to be perceptive to this. Lumpur Cha gauges the temperament of the people with his characteristic quick wisdom. And Lumpur Samedo remains with a small group of monks. Lumpur Viradamo soon joins him. And this tradition just begins. Over time, Lumpur Samedo sanctions and accepts the invitation in various other areas in England, and then also in other areas, Italy, New Zealand, Switzerland, Portugal, so on, Canada, United States. And so this tradition just keeps developing. Something in this way of life draws people to it. Not everybody, not masses of people, but some people. And some of these people find in it resources which draw them to it, nurture them, and allows them to mature within it for their lifetimes. And these people are often very inspiring, actually, their own life stories. I mean, most of us have heard the recollections of Lumpur Samedo, who is, many of us have heard some of these stories several times, and they never get tired because they come from a kind of inexhaustible well. I mean, they're always somehow fresh when he speaks them. But they speak to our willingness to engage in an experience, even where it is not comfortable, because something in us, some kind of incipient wisdom in us, draws us to it again and again, and encourages us to continue, even when, in worldly terms, in view of the expectation maybe of our culture, our parents, or what have you. Even when it doesn't really suffice in the language of the world, but yet something in us draws us to it. And over time, if we give it time, and we apply ourselves with some dedication and loving interest and just patience, willingness to continue, interest, curiosity. We do find in it, it seems, and I can speak for myself. I mean, I find in it, sometimes after periods that are kind of dry, difficult, questioning, wondering, sorting things through this way and that, but again and again, it resolves to a place of some quiet and some stability and some new reckoning of life that lies before me. And I imagine that it's something like that for many of the monks that we know and the nuns that we know. And for all of us, I think that place of continuing, that place of patient endurance and willingness to continue, but also finding again the resources of enthusiasm, inspiration, curiosity. This has to do with coming once again to the first principles in us. You may find that 5 months after you first began practicing, or 5 years, or 30 years after you first began practicing, you may find that similar questions arise again and again. Similar questions to the ones that you had when you were much younger, maybe. Because really good questions don't necessarily get answered. They simply deepen as we give ourselves over to asking them again and again. And of course, maybe the questions also change, they refine, they deepen. That happens too. So we get involved here in this way of life, this practice. We have this opportunity to engage in an ancient tradition, but one which regularly has to renew itself in this culture that we happen to find ourselves in. And that renewal doesn't involve a kind of rewriting of all of the principles that we abide by. The Patimokkha rules don't get rewritten every other year or after yet another parliamentary committee is convened and found them wanting here and there. No, we sort of give ourselves to this ancient tradition, but somehow something in it becomes regularly refreshed. So what are those first principles? Well, in a way, the answer to that, each of you has the answer to that. What is it that you drew? What is it that drew you into the tradition? And another way of looking at that, the first principles are the refuges, the 3 refuges, for instance, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. That would be a way of looking at it. Or anicca, dukkha, anatta. Impermanence, change, unpredictability, uncertainty, suffering, unsatisfactoriness, so forth. Non-selfness, or the lack of some kind of enduring core of a self in the midst of a fluid, dynamic experience. That would be another way of looking at it. Or virtue and calm and wisdom. Sila, samadhi, panya. There's another way of refreshing and looking at first principles. I may have observed this before, but I'm often kind of interested to just ponder on the fact that the Dhamma has a deep and enduring quality what we say about Mandelbrot sets, this form of geometry that kind of replicates itself endlessly, infinitely, apparently, producing similar patterns. So you can look at the tiniest scale or the grandest scale, and the same pattern has been replicated. Anywhere, in other words, anywhere in that pattern that you select, you'll find the entirety. And the Dhamma has this quality, I think. And that's, for me, a kind of first principle. It's a mark of its profundity, but also its beauty. Sometimes we're kind of asked as to what the relevance of this tradition is. Maybe lay people who are, meditators to engage and to discover some calm of mind from time to time, develop loving kindness. This might not be a question that they get asked regularly, but certainly as a monk or a nun, relevance sometimes will arise. And for me, it has to do with the living possibility that what we're engaged in is a reminder, acts as a regular reminder, at least for people who have, ears to hear and eyes to see, that the first principles that we are engaged with, the truths that the Buddha espoused, the integrity, the deep integrity of the practices that he prescribed, that they have enduring relevance to any life. And certainly it can have no less relevance now in our day and age when confusion and disruption and worry and disappointments at so many levels are predominate really in socially and within countries and in individuals themselves. So being offered quietly, because we don't proselytize, but being offered perspectives and practices which are awakening, which are calming, which lead to virtue, and which simply cultivate kindness and generosity, truthfulness, and so forth. But being pointed in this direction and encouraged in that direction by teachings of this kind, I think it just never gets old, It never loses its relevance. So I'm going to encourage you to find your own first principles, abide in them, and remind yourself of them, and rejoice in them. And I'll leave you with these reflections.